whatever happens with this, you'll have like a record going through it.
Where will I have the record?
Here on the on the stream. So people that are even really fit.
I don't know what that is, but it's so perfect.
Right?
Dude. Yeah, like we were supposed to do something that was sorry. Mm-hmm. That was like 2 exercises, and you do them in under a minute, and it depends on how fast you do them. Whatever you get whatever remains of the minute, you get to rest.
Okay.
And then you start again at the top of the minute. But the moves are like moving quickly. I could only get them done in 55 seconds. And I was like, what is she even talking about? Like, who's getting this done in 45 seconds? I'm like pretty fast. No one is.
Okay.
So like one of the many conversations I saw online was like, is it just me, or is this like not a... And a bunch of people were like, I just turned the timer off. Some people were like, I reduced the number of reps. Just like figured workarounds.
Yeah.
And a bunch of them are like super fit. So I feel better about that. However, I submitted my comment/question about the onist.
Oh yeah.
And it said like pending review by the administrator, something like that. And I feel like it should have gone through by now, because unless I'm like screwed, I don't really understand Facebook these days. So I might be screwing this up and might be totally wrong about this, but it looks like there are a bunch of other new comments.
About the honest?
No.
Wait, what?
Like other comments not about that. Like mine hasn't posted.
Oh.
But other people have been able to put comments is what it looks like.
Wait, so it's like a group? And yours was pending review?
Yeah.
You're like accepted into the group, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe it's just because you're trying to sell something.
I was trying to sell something?
Were you?
When was I trying to sell something?
Oh, sorry. I thought you like wanted to post. I thought you like wanted to say, "Hey, does anyone want to buy this off me?"
Oh no.
Oh, okay.
I didn't put it in.
It's just a comment.
I just want to know if anybody else has skin crawling.
Oh.
I'm ticked off that this happened so long ago.
Yeah.
But I have a renewed feeling of being ticked off. That the people at the company were like, no.
Yeah, I think that's crazy. If you have, because I remember you thought it was an allergic reaction, right? Which still might be. Yeah, I'm amazed by that. It seems to me like if you try a product and you have an allergic reaction, you should be able to return it.
Yeah, they were like, that's your allergies, basically. But then reading the stuff about this ingredient, that makes me be like, I don't have to be allergic for this to happen.
No.
Because it doesn't say there's people who are allergic to it. It says potential side effects.
Yeah.
Which is like a...
It was actually so interesting to read up about it, because it's like, wait, what the hell are people taking? And how is this not a drug? Carcinoid. That's what it's like creating in your body, which is...
Who knows? Because that article also said that it only shows up in meat, poultry, and
Yeah.
fish,
Yeah.
and that vegans and vegetarians have
Yeah.
50% the amount of that cost, whatever.
Yeah.
But A, I had way more energy when I became vegan.
Mm.
And B, I ate that shit today and I like struggled through the workout.
Right.
If only like the payoff had been as good as the pins and needles. But I just felt like on fire
Yeah.
and kind of tired.
More tired than if you hadn't taken it.
More tired than I felt in the other workouts. I don't know if that, like maybe I would have been this tired on day 5 anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I can't say more tired, but definitely not like definitely not better than nothing.
Yeah. I can see it taking a little while to work for you, but if it's painful, it's not really worth it.
Yeah.
I think that's insane. I think like any supplement, it's like if it doesn't work for you, you should be able to return it.
I have very strong thoughts about customer service.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a business perspective, even because of the way that I feel on the customer side.
Yeah.
And it all boggles my mind when companies function like this. Like, what are you doing to your own prospective like consumers?
Yeah.
I don't see how that's a good idea.
I got so I just bought like a pimple patch.
What do you mean
Company-
a pimple?
Like pretty much it's like one patch, but it's this company called Averall. I think I'm pronouncing it right. And I'd used it before. I found it at CVS, and then like this past time I went and I couldn't find it in stores, so whatever. I just got it on Amazon. You know, and they're all pretty much the same. But I like this one. I don't know. I just remember it being like really effective. So anyway, I got like whatever. It's like $8. Okay. And then I got a letter. I got a handwritten letter on a greeting card from a customer service representative saying how much they appreciated my business.
Are you sure it's handwritten?
Let me go get it for you. I don't know why it's in my bag.
It's not one of those ones that's like printed to look like it's handwritten.
Pretty sure no.
What?
Okay. I don't think I've ever received anything like this. Like, look, cute little bunnies. Pretty sure that's handwritten. Pretty sure.
Yes, it definitely is.
I mean, this is for an.
She's written it like she writes a lot, but
Yeah, I'm sure. You know that she was just like given this assignment to send out to everyone who had purchased in the past, whatever. Still, for an $8 purchase, I don't know how much the postage cost her, but
I mean it's illegible, but
oh, and she put her phone number or some phone number. I don't know.
her work phone number.
Yeah.
That's not that weird. If she's already writing a
I don't. You think it's like the office, or do you think
Yes.
it's her number? Imagine it's just.
I don't think it's her
Cell
cell phone. That's what I mean.
I still think, hey Jenny. Yeah. Okay. Hey Jenny.
That's how I felt when I got that letter from SWAT.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
What do you? I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah. So strange. But I do feel like okay, I'll support your business.
See,
It does work.
it does work. So like, what are
And
all these
anytime-
other people doing?
Anytime like I've gotten good customer service, I felt the same way. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Hmm. That always bothers me.
I find America in general tends to have better customer service. To the point where sometimes when I first came here, I would go into like a restaurant and be like, what the hell is going on? Like it can be a little too much sometimes.
At a restaurant.
Yeah, like you go into a McDonald's sometimes. Someone's like, you have a great day. I'm like, okay. It's just it's intense if you're not used to that kind of friendliness.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's an American thing.
Yeah. It's like in India.
Everything's much more like casual.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're big into hospitality as well. Like they have a very strong hospitality industry, but it depends on where you are. If you're at McDonald's is not a good example. There's people who take their jobs very seriously.
Yeah. Really?
But that comes from a place of taking their job seriously, not from like a cultural value. Actually, that's not true because there is a cultural value of service.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's part of the training. I'm sure it's part of like the expectation.
Yeah, but hospitality is also a cultural phenomenon. It's not just a business.
Right.
So you can ask anyone for anything. Like, you know, those times where you're like, hey, can I plug my phone in? At least this used to happen in New York.
Mm-hmm.
At some bar or something, and it was a bit of a toss-up, like depending on who you get or whatever.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things, like people will go to the ends of the earth for something. Like, yes, man, definitely, right away, for sure, man. That's for sure. Yeah. I wouldn't call it friendliness, but a customer service thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the infrastructure is not there to like there's not always there to correct mistakes. So like with Amazon, they basically like you're always right. Trader Joe's too.
Yeah.
It's just that's just the policy. It feels like it's built into the bureaucracy that like this is how we handle these situations. Just give it to them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is as true in larger establishments. I have no idea how to answer this question.
That's okay.
But I've given it 3 stabs and
Yeah.
I went to Home Depot today.
You did?
I mean, I didn't get out of the car, but
still, what'd you buy?
Sealant, like wood sealer, sandpaper.
For the
yeah.
The boxes? Yeah.
Boxes?
I don't know what else to call them. What would you call them? Planters?
No, for the stumps.
Oh, for the stumps. Okay.
They've been sitting there for a long time, but I still would like to get them sealed. I started sanding today, and then I was like, what am I giving this free workout for? And I came in and I was like, no, I'm going to do it on my day off. Get an extra workout. So,
it's tomorrow your day off?
Because I fucking decided to use like hand sand as opposed to rent a sander. No, tomorrow is not the fucking day off. Tomorrow is to choose your own adventure, and all the adventures are horrifying. The worst one so far has been the Tabata one, I think.
Yeah.
And today would have been incorrigible if I had actually stuck with the timer, which I just didn't. I was like, no, I'm doing these and how long it takes.
Yeah.
And it took forever because I was all kinds of like lazy and heavy and itchy.
It must be itchy when you're working out. That sounds awful.
And it's like it came in waves. So I would suddenly get like prickles like everywhere. And pins and needles is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the numbness feeling that pins and needles come with, but it's like Yeah, it feels like sharp. I don't know.
Ugh.
I definitely would not call it tingling. Tingling is a very loving word for that.
Yeah, I think I know exactly. Pins and needles. I hate that. Tingling, I'm sure it's different for other people.
Maybe. I mean, if they're putting like 3,000 milligrams of it in every serving, it's got to be working for somebody.
So you're like a tiny person.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a serving is a serving is a serving, right? How do they figure that out?
How do they figure what out? What a serving is?
Yeah, like for like a 6 foot tall guy, he's getting a serving, and he's like double the size of you.
I mean, I can only imagine that they use averages of what, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never been told to like treat servings as not applicable to me because there's too much.
I'm just curious.
It is because there is a huge margin of like there's.
Yeah, especially with something like that. It's like, what are you taking? What's inside of this? That's what I was struck by. I only like got to 2 ingredients down the list, and I was like, what the hell is in this?
Really?
Yeah.
I'm sure all pre-workouts are like this.
Oh, okay, so I've like never explored this. I didn't know pre-workout things were a thing. I didn't know all these extra stuff that athletes were taking.
Not
Yeah. What's in that?
protein,
It's
but
just
that's
like-
like what it's.
But okay, protein is one thing as opposed to like, and it really had me wondering like, so what's the difference between a drug and some chemical compound that apparently makes your muscles not fatigue as quickly?
There doesn't need to be a difference. For whose purposes? Because caffeine is a drug.
Right.
So it's not like we
Yeah.
are not anti-drug,
Yeah,
actually,
right.
right? So do you mean what's the difference between like performance enhancing drugs and
Yeah,
this?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I mean, I'm sure there's some distinction.
Yeah, and I guess like
We
at
can
the end
agree
of the
that it's
day,
chemistry,
they just go
yeah.
through everything and they go like, you're allowed this.
Yeah.
Does that mean that everyone? I guess not.
What?
Like, I guess then I was like, oh shit. So like athletes, like, what the hell do they take in addition to food?
Mm-hmm. Probably a bunch of things.
Yeah. Anyway,
And steroids.
and that seems like pretty heavy duty stuff. To just be like administering to yourself, and there's like a serving size.
But what are you basing it on? Are you like?
Yeah.
What are you basing it on? Because I'm actually not that surprised with the stuff in it, except for the like things that cause, except for the side effects or whatever. But I wouldn't be like, I clearly didn't investigate every ingredient. I was kind of like,
The side effects are troubling. I'm like, oh shit, if it has side effects, that's a bit scary. I don't know. It seemed like it was like doing like it has the potential to like really change the way your body works.
I think caffeine does as well.
At least with caffeine, that was like coffee, and you're like, right, I know what I'm getting, as opposed to just like a mixture that most people probably don't go into like deep detail on what the hell's in it. And they just read like, right, pre-workout, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's true of a lot of things where you can't
I
read
guess
the
so.
you can't read the
Yeah, and I guess that's true of like all processed foods too.
yeah, and it's true of face stuff. You turn around the back, and no, people don't know what is, for by and large, people don't know like what they're putting on the face.
Yeah. For some reason, ingesting is much scarier to me than just topical application.
I mean, stuff gets absorbed.
Yeah.
That's why nicotine patches and stuff work, and birth control patches. Shit gets effectively absorbed through your skin.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's where a lot of those of ads are coming from. They're like, oh, with ingredients you can pronounce. Chemistry.
Chemistry. I was
Brought
just
to you by
surprised.
chemistry.
I'm just surprised.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things
Whew.
to take. Ah, should we read?
Sure. It's
I don't have anything else on the agenda.
Yeah.
Other than whining about my class.
your, your meals that are too large.
Yeah. But I think I just have to like figure out how it works. So at lunch today, I just had the protein and the vegetables. And then like an hour and a half later, I was like, oh, okay, I'm feeling the carbs now. And then I went and ate some sweet potato. So I think I'm just not used to eating like a bunch of things in one sitting. And that might be why I take 5 hours to eat inside.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like not eating it in one sitting.
I had a friend who was like that. She just ate so slowly. She had a lot of like weird food things. But it took her about like 3 hours at a restaurant.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Jeez. That's crazy. I wouldn't still be hungry even if for no other reason than that I was like bored of what was happening at a restaurant.
Because now I'm like, that is crazy.
Yeah, because at home with acai bowls, I'm like doing other stuff. I'm not just
Yeah.
sitting at the dining table with my acai bowl for 3 hours.
She would order a lot of food too. And then had very specific requirements. Like food couldn't touch, it was one of those things.
One of those things.
You know. And then like the servers are coming over and they're trying to take it. And she's like, no. I'm still working on it.
This person sounds really cool.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, dude, why are everybody else's fucking comments posted?
Post a comment about everyone else's comment.
Like how?
You should be like, I tried to comment and I haven't been allowed to. What's going on? And see what happens there. I'm just commenting on the commenting system.
Yeah. What happened yesterday? Almost nothing. We went back to Pierre. He's charming pants off of all of the French gods. Bunch of stuff about Napoleon and about how deliberate people's strategies are in war, and the answer is not at all. Not at all deliberate and not at all useful.
Yeah. So Napoleon, put out some announcements for the people of Moscow,
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, it's okay, everybody. Come out of hiding. Go to market. Go to church.
Mm-hmm.
Do not worry. The pillaging will stop." And the pillaging did not stop.
Did you say the pillaging would stop?
Yeah. I don't know if he said pillaging, but he was like, "It's definitely safe. We're restoring order." Yeah. And the soldiers have gone mad to a certain extent.
They're completely out of control.
Yeah.
But then he quit Moscow, and they just loaded up all this bounty, onto carts and carriages, and I guess they stole all of those as well, because the army obviously didn't come with carriages.
Yeah.
They just stuffed them and left. And one of the big points he was making was that Napoleon made a series of unforced, pretty excellent errors that caused him to go from having Moscow to losing the war. And that he spectacularly negotiated that loss with a series of really stupid choices.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, there's a lot of that. So much build-up about the ruin of the French. They're really good when we finally get to it.
I think this is part of it.
Yeah.
Him talking about the ruin is part of it.
Yeah, okay. I remember in history class. Yeah. Because we did cover this.
Woo!
At some point. I had to.
I'm only imagining that I did. I don't know. I don't remember it.
I had half a semester of world history.
Mm-hmm.
And we stampeded through a bunch of these wars, including this one.
Europe is world history?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, we had a whole separate section for Europe.
Sure. We should have.
Yeah, but it was Europe and then the rest of the world,
Mm-hmm.
which is not bad.
Yeah, we did Canada, Europe.
Just Europe? I thought you said world history. It wasn't more than Europe?
I don't think so.
Cool.
We don't we covered some of America because of that was mostly an English class though, reading books. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There might have been some about other countries just focusing a lot on colonialism.
So Europe.
You're talking about England and you're in other parts of the world. Yeah. And what I remember from the Napoleonic War is the retreat of the French. Maybe along some road. And them just starving. That's pretty much all I remember about it.
They, I assume, are clutching to their bounty.
Yes.
They can't eat the fucking galoshes.
It's so parable
Well, we'll see. I don't remember any. So
right.
If it is starving, because I thought that it had something to do with cold, but those aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I think it goes together. Yeah, I remember it's because they didn't expect winter.
Right. So if it's that they were starving, that is an even more perfect parable.
Yeah.
Chapter 12. Four weeks had passed since Pierre had been taken prisoner, and though the French had offered to move him from the men's to the officers' shed, he had stayed in the shed where he was first put.
Yeah, the officers like him.
Really loves him.
In burned and devastated Moscow, Pierre experienced almost the extreme limits of privation a man can endure. But thanks to his physical strength and health, of which he had till then been unconscious, and thanks especially to the fact that the privations came so gradually that it was impossible to say when they began, he endured his position not only lightly but joyfully. And just at this time he obtained the tranquillity and ease of mind he had formerly striven in vain to reach. He had long sought in different ways that tranquillity of mind, that inner harmony which had so impressed him in the soldiers at the Battle of Borodino. He had sought in it philanthropy. He had sought it in philanthropy, in masonry, in the dissipations of town life, in wine, in heroic feats of self-sacrifice, and in romantic love for Natasha. He had sought it by reasoning, and all these quests and experiments had failed him. And now, without thinking about it, he had found that peace and inner harmony only through the horror of death, through privation, and through what he recognized in Karatsiev.
Those dreadful moments he had lived through at the executions had, as it were, forever washed away from his imagination and memory the agitating thoughts and feelings that had formerly seemed so important. It did not now occur to him to think of Russia, or the war, or politics, or Napoleon. It was plain to him that all these things were no business of his, and that he was not called on to judge them, not called on to judge concerning them, and therefore could not do so. Russia and summer weather are not bound together, he thought, repeating words of Karatiev's which he found strangely consoling. His intention of killing Napoleon and his calculations of the cabalistic number of the beast of the apocalypse now seemed to him meaningless and even ridiculous. His anger with his wife and anxiety that his name should not be smirched. Besmirched? Where did we get besmirched?
Besmirched.
It should not be
Smirched.
smirched.
Yeah.
We definitely don't say smirched these days. We say besmirched, right?
It is besmirched. I don't know the difference.
I never knew you could behead besmirch and just use smirched. That's like realizing you can not only say overwhelmed but whelmed.
Does whelmed just mean like you're good? I'm whelmed.
I mean, I feel like this was in Mean Girls. And
Does that also mean you can be beheaded, but you can be headed? Head him. Or any of the bees. Anyway.
that his name should not be smirched now seemed not merely trivial but even amusing. What concern was it of his that somewhere or other that woman was leading the life she preferred? Incidentally, she's not. What did it matter to anybody, and especially to him, whether or not they found that their prisoner's name was Count Bezhukov?
He now often remembered his conversation with Prince Andrew and quite agreed with him, though he understood Prince Andrew's thoughts somewhat differently. Prince Andrew had thought and said that happiness could only be negative, but had said it with a shade of bitterness and irony, as though he was really saying that all desire for positive happiness is implanted in us merely to torment us and never be satisfied.
Whoa.
But Pierre believed it without any mental reservation. The absence of suffering, the satisfaction of one's needs, and consequent freedom in the choice of one's occupation, that is, of one's way of life, now seemed to Pierre to be indubitably man's highest happiness. Here now, for the first time, he fully appreciated the enjoyment of eating when he wanted to eat, drinking when he wanted to drink, sleeping when he wanted to sleep, of warmth when he was cold, of talking to a fellow man when he wished to talk and to hear a human voice. The satisfaction of one's needs, good food, cleanliness, and freedom, now that he was deprived of all this, seemed to Pierre to constitute perfect happiness, and the choice of occupation, that is, of his way of life, Now that that was so restricted, it seemed to him such an easy matter that he forgot that a of superfluidity, yeah, superfluidity, fluid, of the comforts of life destroys all joy in satisfying one's needs. While
Here's your remedy for what you were talking about last night about America. It's not a remedy. It's more of a diagnosis.
Yeah. While great freedom in the choice of occupation, such freedom as his wealth, his education, and his social position had given him in his own life, is just what makes the choice of occupation insolubly difficult and destroys the desire and possibility of having an occupation.
All Pierre's daydreams now turned on the time when he would be free. Yet subsequently, and for the rest of his life, he thought and spoke with enthusiasm of that month of captivity, of those irrecoverable, strong, joyful sensations, and chiefly of the complete peace of mind and inner freedom which he experienced only during those weeks.
When on the first day he got up early, went out of the shed at dawn, and saw the cupolas and crosses of the new convent of the Virgin still dark at first, the hoarfrost on the dusty grass, the Sparrow Hills, and the wooded banks above the winding river vanishing in the purple distance, when he felt the contact of the fresh air and heard the noise of the crows flying from Moscow across the field, and when afterwards light gleamed from the east and the sun's rim appeared solemnly from behind a cloud, and the cupolas and crosses, the hoarfrost, the distance, and the river all began to sparkle in the glad light, Pierre felt a new joy and strength in life such as he had never known before. And this not only stayed with him during the whole of his imprisonment, but even grew in strength as the hardships of his position increased.
I feel like this reminds me of the mini experience of being quarantined.
Yeah.
Yeah, like once all this stuff is just quite simply cut off.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay. I've got food here, like got like project things to busy myself with, projects or creative work as well as like just labor type work. I don't know.
I mean, I think it's why people argue for minimalism too.
Yeah, but I don't know if those minimalist people like argue for no occupations and shit like that.
Yeah.
You know, like occupation is a huge thing for people.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like not having an occupation has been almost freeing for my creativity because now it's just creativity. It's not this other thing.
Yeah. I think it makes people more productive. Like there's all these tests, right, about people having to like go in and do some like a game, like calculations and getting paid for it. Versus like some subjects that aren't getting paid for it. And I think like they both kind of perform the same amount, or maybe like the people who get paid for it like do it a bit faster because there's incentive.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they come back and they're like, okay, so now actually the budget changed. Instead of getting $25, we can only give you $5. Like those people no longer want to do it, like have zero interest. And the people who are just doing it for the fun of it, like their interest stays out.
Are they given $5 as well or no? They stay at nothing.
Stay at nothing. But their interest hasn't changed. Maybe there's something done with it. And I'm sure there's like various, but like so incentivizing actually has downfalls, like very serious downfalls.
Right, because it that makes sense because it creates a relationship where the thing you're getting becomes like the thing you're doing becomes contingent.
Yeah.
Rather than just whatever.
I think love of learning, like that's the most obvious thing I think of. When you're graded suddenly for having to learn something, totally changes your relationship to it.
Yeah. I didn't like to read because it was so to me connected to
And I think that's what, you know, it would be great. Like universal income, is that what it's called? I think it might actually have the exact opposite effect that everyone's afraid it will have.
Some people are afraid of it.
Yeah. And there might be like a period in which people are like, so why do I do anything now? Sure, because they've been like,
Again, because it's fused to the incentive system.
yeah,
So if you disrupt that system, then it will feel like what is supposed to fuel this effort, because before this was fueling.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's something that like, I mean, granted, I'm not like contributing to society that much right now.
Mhm.
None of us are able to do a huge amount of that right now. But still, the fact that the government like is attempting to send me money, it's not good customer service. I don't know. It makes me like feel better. Not just because of the like practical, the obvious practical.
you feel supported, you feel safe.
Yeah, it's a lot like the customer service thing actually, in terms of like how you, yeah, like how you treat people when it comes to give and take. Which is again why it's so confusing when you walk into those like casting offices where it's really difficult to concentrate or they're extremely unpleasant. You're like, what do you think you're gonna get out of this? That are very active, unfriendly spaces. Who's winning here?
Yeah,
Anyone?
yeah, really. It makes you realize that like the opposite of this, what like people are used to, is like, yeah, if you don't work, like you're dead.
Yeah.
Like bye. We have no use for you. And I don't know, you'll be homeless. Yeah. And that is such a, firstly, it's like so unnecessary. There's no need for that, for it to be that. And no wonder everyone's so fucking anxious.
And there are a lot of homeless people.
Yeah. And there's no like, I mean, there is some, but satisfaction is hard to come by because it's no longer like, yeah, like, oh, my work, so fulfilling. It's like, that's the thing keeping me from being on the streets. Like, you don't actually get to be doing your work. You're just trying to survive.
Right.
Right.
Capolas.
That feeling of alertness. Sorry.
Yeah. That feeling of alertness and of readiness for anything was still further strengthened in him by the high opinion his fellow prisoners formed of him soon after his arrival at the shed. With his knowledge of languages, the respect shown him by the French, his simplicity, his readiness to give anything asked of him, he received the allowance of 3 rubles a week made to officers. With his strength, which he showed to the soldiers by pressing nails into the walls of the hut, his gentleness to his companions, and his capacity for sitting still and thinking without doing anything which seemed to them incomprehensible, he appeared to them a rather mysterious and superior being. The very qualities that had been a hindrance, if not actually harmful to him in the world he had lived in, his strength, his disdain for the comforts of life, his absent-mindedness and simplicity, here among these people gave him almost the status of a hero. And Pierre felt that their opinion placed responsibilities upon him.
Chapter 13. The French evacuation began on the night between the 6th and 7th of October. Kitchens and sheds were dismantled, carts loaded, and troops and baggage trains started.
At 7 in the morning, a French convoy, in marching trim, whatever that is, wearing shakos and carrying muskets, knapsacks, sleeping bags, and enormous sacks, stood in front of the sheds, and animated French talk mingled with curses sounded all along the lines.
In the shed, everyone was ready, dressed, belted, shod, and only awaited the order to start. The sick soldier, Sokolov, pale and thin with dark shadows round his eyes, alone sat in his place barefoot and not dressed. His eyes, prominent from the emaciation of his face, gazed inquiringly at his comrades, who were paying no attention to him, and he moaned regularly and quietly. It was evidently not so much his sufferings that caused him to moan, he had dysentery, as his fear and grief at being left alone.
Pierre, girt with a rope round his waist and wearing shoes Karatsiev had made for him, from some leather a French soldier had torn off a tea chest and brought to have his boots mended with, went up to the sick man and squatted down beside him.
You know, Sokolov, they are not all going away. They have a hospital here. You may be better off than we others, said Pierre.
Oh, Lord! Oh, it will be the death of me! Oh, Lord! Moaned the man in a louder voice.
I'll go and ask them again directly, said Pierre, rising and going to the door of the shed.
Just as Pierre reached the door, the corporal, who had offered him a pipe the day before, came up to it with two soldiers. Or the door. What's the it?
Wait, what?
Came up to it. I was like, what's the it? It's the door.
Yeah.
The corporal and soldiers were in marching kit with knapsacks and shakos that had metal straps, and these changed their familiar faces.
The corporal came, according to others, to shut the door. The prisoners... Oh. The corporal came according to orders to shut the door. The prisoners had to be counted before being let out.
Corporal, what will they do with the sick man? Pierre began.
But even as he spoke, he began to doubt whether this was the corporal he knew or a stranger. So unlike himself did the corporal seem at that moment. Moreover, just as Pierre was speaking, a sharp rattle of drums was suddenly heard from both sides. The corporal frowned at Pierre's words and, uttering some meaningless oaths, slammed the door. The shed became semi-dark, and the sharp rattle of the drums on two sides drowned the sick man's groans.
There it is. It again, said Pierre to himself, and an involuntary shudder ran down his spine. In the corporal's changed face, there's what again? In the corporal's changed face, in the sound of his voice, in the stirring and deafening noise of the drums, he recognized that mysterious, that mysterious, callous force which compelled people against their will to kill their fellow men. That force, the effect of which he had witnessed during the executions. To fear or to try to escape that force, to address entreaties or exhortations to those who served as its tools was useless. Pierre knew this now. One had to wait and endure. He did not again go to the sick man, nor turn to look at him, but stood frowning by the door of the hut.
When that door was opened, and the prisoners, crowding against one another like a flock of sheep, squeezed into the exit, Pierre pushed his way forward and approached that very captain who, as the corporal had assured him, was ready to do anything for him. The captain was also in marching kit, and on his cold face appeared that same it, which Pierre had recognized in the corporal's words and in the roll of the drums.
Pass on, the captain reiterated, frowning sternly and looking at the prisoners who thronged past him.
Pierre went up to him, though he knew his attempt would be vain.
What now? The officer asked with a cold look as if not recognizing Pierre.
Pierre told him about the sick man.
He'll manage to walk, devil take him, said the captain. Pass on, he continued without looking at Pierre.
He is dying, Pierre again began.
Be so good, shouted the captain, frowning angrily.
Drum-da-da-dum-dum-dum, rattled the drums, and Pierre understood that this mysterious force completely controlled these men, and that it was now useless to say any more.
The officer prisoners were separated from the soldiers and told to march in front. There were about 30 officers, with Pierre among them, and about 300 men.
The officers, who had come from the other sheds, were all strangers to Pierre, and much better dressed than he. They looked at him and at his shoes mistrustfully, as at an alien. Not far from him walked a fat major with a sallow, bloated, angry face, who was wearing a Kazan dressing gown tied round with a towel, and who evidently enjoyed the respect of his fellow prisoners.
Wait, do you think he means alien as in from
So I was
space?
like, did they know about aliens? I was just wondering.
Know about?
Yeah, okay. No, but I was like, oh, are there alien sightings? Do people think about that at this time?
I mean, I'm sure people think about it. I wasn't aware they used that word exactly.
Yeah. Or whether they mean like someone from a different
Yeah.
place.
Which
Not
has
sure.
always been a really weird word to use to me. I never heard it before the US.
Mhm.
An alien
Yeah.
as like a person.
I mean, but that actually makes it's like disalienating, you know. Like,
Mm-hmm. But mostly, at least where I'm from, it's used for aliens.
yeah, so if it has like that, that's like really strange when it has that combined. I don't know what came first.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, he kept one hand in which he clasped his tobacco pouch inside the bosom of his dressing gown and held the stem of his pipe firmly with the other. Panting and puffing, the major grumbled and growled at everybody because he thought he was being pushed, and that they were all hurrying when they had nowhere to hurry to, and were all surprised at something when there was nothing to be surprised at. Another, a thin little officer, was speaking to everyone, conjecturing where they were now being taken and how far they would get that day. An official in felt boots and wearing a commissariat uniform ran round from side to side and gazed at the ruins of Moscow, loudly announcing his observations as to what had been burned down and what this or that part of the city was that they could see. A third officer, who by his accent was a Pole, disputed with the commissariat officer, arguing that he was mistaken in his identification of the different wards of Moscow.
What are you disputing about? Said the major angrily. What does it matter whether it is St. Nicholas or St. Blasius? Blasius. You see, it's burned down and there's an end of it. What are you pushing for? Isn't the road wide enough? Said he, turning to a man behind him who was not pushing him at all.
Oh, what have they done? The prisoners on one side and another were heard saying as they gazed on the charred ruins. All beyond the river and Zubova and in the Kremlin, just look. There's not half of it left. Yes, I told you, the whole quarter beyond the river, and so it is.
Well, you know it's burned, so what's the use of talking? Said the major.
As they passed near a church in Kamovniki, one of the few unburned quarters of Moscow, the whole mass of prisoners suddenly started to one side, and exclamations of horror and disgust were heard.
Ah, the villains, what heathens, yes, dead, so he is, and smeared with something.
Here, too, drew near the church where the thing was that evoked these exclamations, and dimly made out something leaning against the palings surrounding the church. From the words of his comrades, who saw better than he did, he found that this was the body of a man, set upright against the palings, with his face smeared with soot.
Go on, what the devil, go on! 30,000 devils! The convoy guards began cursing, and the French soldiers, with fresh virulence, drove away with their swords the crowd of prisoners who were gazing at the dead man. Who do you think it is?
You think it's someone we know?
Maybe.
I think it's probably not anyone we know.
I don't think some unimportant person would be like impaled and
Oh,
like
really?
dead, like on display at the ruins of the church.
Destruction. Well, Pierre doesn't know him.
I don't know if you're just
Yes. Interesting. Yeah. Sorry, I'm also looking up Alien.
Chapter 14.
Wait, I just want to say, yeah, it's like Alien. It's from Old French, strange, foreign. So that, I guess that was its first origin. And we added Alien onto Aliens.
What do you mean we added alien onto alien?
Like, that's what we called them.
Who?
Like, little green men.
Yeah, I'm curious about when that started.
Yeah. (1953).
Recent.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Through the cross streets of the Kamovniki quarter, the prisoners marched, followed only by their escort and the vehicles and wagons belonging to that escort. But when they reached the supply stores, they came among a huge and closely packed train of artillery mingled with private vehicles.
At the bridge, they all halted, waiting for those in front to get across. From the bridge, they had a view of endless lines of moving baggage trains before and behind them. To the right, where the Kaluga Road turns near Neshkuchny, endless rows of troops and carts stretched away into the distance. These were troops of Beauharnais' corps, which had started before any of the others. Behind, along the riverside and across the stone bridge, were Ney's troops and transport.
Davout's troops, in whose charge were the prisoners, were crossing the Crimean Bridge, and some were already debouching.
Debouching?
What?
Emerged from a narrow, confined space into a wide, open area.
Who the fuck ever heard of this one?
Debouch.
Debouch? Debouching, you think it is?
I think so. Well, yeah, I never know how to actually read those like pronunciation symbols.
Phonetics?
Yeah.
It says both. But the baggage trains stretched out so that the last of Beauharnais' train had not yet got out of Moscow and reached the Kaluga Road when the vanguard of Ney's army was already emerging from the great Ordinka Street.
When they had crossed the Crimean Bridge, the prisoners moved a few steps forward, halted, and again moved on, and from all sides vehicles and men crowded closer and closer together. They advanced the few hundred paces that separated the bridge from the Kaluga Road, taking more than an hour to do so, and came out upon the square where the streets of the Trans-Moskva ward and the Kaluga Road converge. And the prisoners jammed close together, had to stand for some hours at that crossway. From all sides, like the roar of the sea, were heard the rattle of wheels, the tramp of feet, and incessant shouts of anger and abuse. Pierre stood pressed against the wall of a charred house, listening to that noise which mingled in his imagination with the roll of the drums.
To get a better view, several officer prisoners climbed onto the wall of the half-burnt house against which Pierre was leaning.
What crowds! Just look at the crowds! They've loaded goods, even on the cannon. Look there, those are furs, they exclaimed. Just see what the blackguards have looted there. See what that one has behind in the cart? Why, those are settings taken from some icons. By heaven! Oh, the rascals! See how that fellow has loaded himself up? He can hardly walk. Good Lord! They've even grabbed those chaises. See that fellow there sitting on the trunks? Heavens, they're fighting.
That's right. Hit him on the snout. On his snout! Like this. We shan't get away before evening. Look here. Look there. Why, that must be Napoleon's own. See what horses and the monograms with the crown? It's like a portable house. That fellow's dropped his sack and doesn't see it. Fighting again, a woman with a baby, and not bad looking either. Yes, I dare say that's the way they let you pass. Just look, there's no end to it. Russian wenches, by heavens, so they are, in carriages. See how comfortably they've settled themselves.
Again, as at the church in Kamovniki, a wave of general curiosity bore all the prisoners forward onto the road. And Pierre, thanks to his stature, saw over the heads of the others what so attracted their curiosity. In 3 carriages, involved among the munition carts, closely squeezed together, sat women with rouged faces, dressed in glaring colors, who were shouting something in shrill voices.
From the moment Pierre had recognized the appearance of the mysterious force, nothing had seemed to him strange or dreadful. Neither the corpse smeared with soot for fun, nor these women hurrying away, nor the burned ruins of Moscow. All that he now witnessed scarcely made an impression on him, as if his soul, making ready for a hard struggle, refused to receive impressions that might weaken it.
The women's vehicles drove by. Behind them came more carts, soldiers, wagons, soldiers. What? Okay. More carts, soldiers, wagons, soldiers, gun carriages, soldiers, ammunition carts, more soldiers, and now and then women.
Pierre did not see the people as individuals, but saw their movement.
All these people and horses seemed driven forward by some invisible power.
During the hour, Pierre watched them During the hour Pierre watched them, they all came, flowing from different streets with one and the same desire to get on quickly. They all jostled one another, began to grow angry and to fight. White teeth gleamed, brows furrowed. Ever the same words of abuse flew from side to side, and all the faces bore the same swaggeringly resolute and coldly cruel expression that had struck Pierre that morning on the corporal's face when the drums were beating.
It was not till nearly evening that the officer commanding the escort collected his men and with shouts and quarrels forced his way in among the baggage trains. And the prisoners, hemmed in on all sides, emerged onto the Kaluga road.
They marched very quickly without resting, and halted only when the sun began to set. The baggage carts drew up close together, and the men began to prepare for their night's rest. They all appeared angry and dissatisfied. For a long time, oaths, angry shouts, and fighting could be heard from all sides. A carriage that followed the escort ran into one of the carts and knocked a hole in it with its pole. Several soldiers ran toward the cart from different sides. Some beat the carriage horses on their heads. Fuck you! Turning them aside, others fought among themselves, and Pierre saw that one German was badly wounded on the head by a sword.
It seemed that all these men, now that they had stopped amid fields in the chill dusk of the autumn evening, experienced one and the same feeling of unpleasant awakening from the hurry and eagerness to push on that had seized them at the start. Once at a standstill, they all seemed to understand that they did not yet know where they were going, and that much that was painful and difficult awaited them on this journey.
During this halt, the escort treated the prisoners even worse than they had done at the start. It was here that the prisoners for the first time received horseflesh for their meat ration.
From the officer down to the lowest soldier, they showed what seemed like personal spite against each of the prisoners, an unexpected contrast to their former friendly relations.
This spite increased still more when, on calling over the roll of prisoners, it was found that in the bustle of leaving Moscow, one Russian soldier, who had pretended to suffer from colic, had escaped. Pierre saw a Frenchman beat a Russian soldier cruelly for straying too far from the road, and heard his friend, the captain, reprimand and threaten to court-martial a non-commissioned officer on account of the escape of the Russian. To the non-commissioned officer's excuse that the prisoner was ill and could not walk, the officer replied that the order was to shoot those who lagged behind. Pierre felt that that fatal force which had crushed him during the executions, but which he had not felt during his imprisonment, now again controlled his existence. It was terrible. But he felt that in proportion to the efforts of that fatal force to crush him, there grew and strengthened in his soul a power of life independent of it.
He ate his supper of buckwheat soup. What is up with these soups? Buckwheat
That's a more normal sounding soup than usual.
and mayonnaise soup, granted.
And like the weird fishy soups. Remember there were like a lot of
Turtles.
really gross.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is buckwheat?
Buckwheat's a grain.
Does it look kind of like rice then?
I'm not sure, actually. I get some of them confused. Huh. It's really pretty.
Yeah, it's like a Ooh.
Look
That
like
makes
little
me wanna eat
hazelnuts
it
or
more.
something.
You know, I hate the taste of buckwheat, but that makes me.
They look like hazelnuts.
Yeah.
I've only ever had it in flour form,
Yeah.
pancakes and stuff. You hate the taste? I think it's,
Normally, yeah. You like it?
I think it's like a non-entity. It makes no great impression on it.
Just kind of tastes like cardboard.
Buckwheat noodles.
Buckwheat pancakes.
Yeah. I would put them in my face now. I really should have put much more wonderful things in my diet. Like I should have been like, I love.
Oh, right, because you told her what you like to eat.
My favorite things. They made no appearance, really. But other people are like, I have Halo Top in my diet. I'm like, okay.
Oh, that's the ice cream, right?
I don't think they have any vegan options.
We do.
You do?
I think so. I've never tried.
Oh, they do. They do.
Yeah? What flavors they got?
Birthday cake, candy bar, chocolate almond crunch, chocolate chip cookie dough, peanut butter cup, sea salt caramel. Not B-A-D.
There's so much food options in this country. In the state, actually.
Dude, the chocolate chip cookie dough looks really good.
What is in the cookie dough?
I just got completely diverted.
You're like, hey, look top. Okay, I'm gonna read. You can keep looking at that.
What? Sorry.
That's if you wanna, it's fine.
It's okay because I'm gonna have to get up and at some point get Advil because my thing's dead and I need to plug it in and I'm dying a bit. But I keep trying to find a good time to do that, like a long paragraph.
Okay.
Neither Pierre nor any of the others spoke of what they had seen in Moscow, or of the roughness of their treatment by the French, or of the order to shoot them which had been announced to them. As if in reaction against the worsening of their position, they were all particularly animated and gay. They spoke of personal reminiscences, of amusing scenes they had witnessed during the campaign, and avoided all talk of their present situation.
The sun had set long since. Bright stars shone out here and there in the sky. A red glow as a conflagration spread above the horizon from the rising full moon, and that vast red ball swayed strangely in the gray haze. It grew light. The evening was ending, but the night had not yet come. Pierre got up and left his new companions, crossing between the campfires to the other side of the road, where he had been told the common soldiers' prisoners were stationed. He wanted to talk to them. On the road, he was stopped by a French sentinel who ordered him back.
Pierre turned back, not to his companions by the campfire, but to an unharnessed cart where there was nobody. Tucking his legs under him and dropping his head, he sat down on the cold ground by the wheel of the cart and remained motionless a long while, sunk in thought. Suddenly, he burst out into a fit of his broad, good-natured laughter, so loud that men from various sides turned with surprise to see what this strange and evidently solitary laughter could mean.
Laughed Pierre, and he said aloud to himself, "The soldier did not let me pass."
Your laughing is always really funny.
Not all of us can do
Genius fake laughs.
yeah.
No, I do like laugh yoga.
Meaning like it's just really abundant.
No, like I trust that if I just fling myself into it, almost immediately it becomes real.
Yeah, I think that's my problem.
Which I feel like is true.
I don't fling myself.
No, you
I
don't.
hold back.
You're like,
Okay, let me try.
You don't have to
No, I'm gonna try. Okay. Why is it so scary?
It's really scary.
Yeah,
It's very vulnerable. That's why I said you don't.
laughing's really vulnerable.
Yeah.
Still had to do a bit of like.
That was good.
Okay. Oh, there's more to come.
I mean, if you can handle
Yeah. The soldiers did not let me pass. They took me and shut me up. They hold me captive. What, me? Me? My immortal soul? And he laughed till tears started to his eyes.
That's actually really funny.
Yeah, it is.
A man got up and came to see what this queer big fellow was laughing at all by himself. Pierre stopped laughing, got up, went farther away from the inquisitive man, and looked around him.
The huge, endless bivouac that had previously resounded with the crackling of campfires and the voices of many men had grown quiet. The red campfires were growing paler and dying down. High up in the light sky hung the full moon. Forests and fields beyond the camp, unseen before, were now visible in the distance. And farther still, beyond those forests and fields, the bright, oscillating, limitless distance lured one to itself.
Good Lord.
Pierre glanced up at the sky and the twinkling stars in its faraway depths. And all that is me, all that is within me. And it is all I, thought Pierre. And they caught all that and put it into a shed boarded up with planks. He smiled and went and lay down to sleep beside his companions.
That's really fun.
Love that.
I mean, it's really not different from Kevin Bacon. It's all the same shit.
There's something about that, like, yeah, they took me and shut me up. What are they shutting up?
In the early days of October, another envoy came to Kutuzov with a letter from Napoleon proposing peace and falsely dated from Moscow. Though Napoleon was already not far from Kutuzov on the old Kaluga road. Kutuzov replied to this letter as he had done to the one formerly brought by Lauriston, saying that there could be no question of peace.
Soon after that, a report was received from Dorokov's guerrilla detachment operating to the left of Tarantino that troops of Broussier's division had been seen at Forminsk, and that being separated from the rest of the French army, they might easily be destroyed. The soldiers and officers again demanded action. Generals on the staff, excited by the memory of the easy victory at Tarantino, urged Kutuzov to carry out Dorokov's suggestion. Kutuzov did not consider any offensive necessary. The result was a compromise which was inevitable. A small detachment was sent to Forminsk to attack Broussier.
By a strange coincidence, this task, which turned out to be a most difficult and important one, was entrusted to Doktorov, that same modest little Doktorov whom no one had described to us as drawing up plans of battles, dashing about in front of regiments, showering crosses on batteries, and so on, and who was thought to be, and was spoken of as undecided and undiscerning, but whom we find commanding wherever the position was most difficult, all through the Russo-French wars from Austerlitz to the year 1813. At Austerlitz, he remained last at the Augest Dam, rallying the regiments, saving what was possible when all were flying and perishing, and not a single general was left in the rear guard. Ill with fever, he went to Smolensk with 20,000 men to defend the town against Napoleon's whole army. In Smolensk, at the Malakhov Gate, he had hardly dozed off in a paroxysm of fear before he was awakened by the bombardment of the town, and Smolensk held out all day long. At the Battle of Borodino, when Bagration was killed and 9/10 of the men of our left flank had fallen, and the full force of the French artillery fire was directed against it, the man sent there was this same irresolute and undiscerning Doktorov. Kutuzov hastening to rectify a mistake he had made by sending someone else there first. And the quiet little Doktorov rode thither, and Borodino became the greatest glory of the Russian army. Many heroes have been described to us in verse and prose, but of Doktorov, scarcely a word has been said.
It was Doktorov again whom they sent to Forminsk, and from there to Maloyaroslavets, the place where the last battle with the French was fought, and where the obvious disintegration of the French army began. And we are told of many geniuses and heroes of that period of the campaign. But of Doktorov, nothing or very little is said, and that dubiously. And this silence about Doktorov is the clearest testimony to his merit.
It is natural for a man who does not understand the workings of a machine to imagine that a shaving that has fallen into it by chance and is interfering with its action and tossing about in it is its most important part. The man who does not understand the construction of the machine cannot conceive that the small connecting cogwheel, which revolves quietly, is one of the most essential parts of the machine, and not the shaving, which merely harms and hinders the working.
On the 10th of October, when Doktorov had gone halfway to Forminsk and stopped at the village of Aristovo, preparing faithfully to execute the orders he had received, the whole French army having, in its convulsive movement, reached Murat's position, apparently in order to give battle, suddenly, without any reason, turned off to the left, onto the new Kaluga road, and began to enter Forminsk, where only Broussier had been till then. At that time, Doktorov had under his command, besides Doktorov's detachment, the two small guerrilla detachments of Figner and Seslavin.
On the evening of October 11, Seslavin came to the Aristovo headquarters with the French guardsmen he had captured. The prisoner said that the troops that had entered Forminsk that day were the vanguard of the whole army, that Napoleon was there, and the whole army had left Moscow 4 days previously. That same evening, a house serf who had come from Borovsk said he had seen an immense army entering the town. Some Cossacks of Doktorov's detachment reported having sighted the French guards marching along the road to Borovsk. From all these reports, it was evident that where they had expected to meet a single division, there was now the whole French army, marching from Moscow in an unexpected direction along the Kaluga road. Doktorov was unwilling to undertake any action, as it was not clear to him now what he ought to do. He had been ordered to attack Forminsk. But only Broussier had been there at that time, and now the whole French army was there. Ermolov wished to act on his own judgment, but Doktorov insisted that he must have Kutuzov's instructions. So it was decided to send a dispatch to the staff.
For this purpose, a capable officer, Bolkovitnov, was chosen, who was to explain the whole affair by word of mouth, besides delivering a written report. Toward midnight, Bolkovitnov, having received the dispatch and verbal instructions, galloped off to the general staff, accompanied by a Cossack with spare horses.
I feel like you get older really
I
hard.
know. I'm like, great, Bolkovitnov. I just need to take more time. We're not in a rush here.
Or less,
Or less time.
Maybe.
Just first sound that comes out of your head.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I do sometimes too.
Yeah.
I just pray. Say a little prayer and
Yeah. I get started without knowing where I'm going.
yeah.
I'm like, start talking.
Works.
Is now the time that I should get my Advil?
I think so.
Okay.
I'll keep reading. Unless you want me to wait for you.
How about read extremely loudly?
Okay. Chapter 16. It was a warm, dark autumn night.
It was a what?
It was a warm, dark autumn night. It had been raining for 4 days. Having changed horses twice and galloped 20 miles in an hour and a half over a sticky, muddy road, Bolkovitnov reached Litashevka after 1 o'clock at night. Dismounting at a cottage on whose wattle fence hung a signboard, General Staff, and throwing down his reins, he entered a dark passage. The general on duty, quick! It's very important, said he to someone who had risen and was sniffing the dark passage. He has been very unwell since the evening, and this is the third night he has not slept, said the orderly pleadingly in a whisper. You should wake the captain first. But this is very important, from General Doktorov, said Bolkovitnov. Huh?
Who's not awake for himself?
No, what does he want? He wants the general on duty.
Oh.
I don't think he knows who it is. But this is very important, from General Doktorov, said Bolkovitnov, entering the open door which he had found by feeling in the dark. The orderly had gone in before him and began waking somebody. Your Honor, a courier. What? What's that? From whom? Came a sleepy voice. From Doktorov and from Alexei Petrovich.
Who the hell is that?
You know Doktorov.
No, Alexei.
Alexei Petrovich.
Who the damn shit is that?
I don't know. Napoleon is at Fominsk, said Bolkovitnov, unable to see in the dark who was speaking, but guessing by the voice that it was not Khvoronitsyn.
The man who had wakened yawned and stretched himself.
I don't like waking him, he said, fumbling for something. He's very ill. Perhaps this is only a rumor.
Here is the dispatch, said Bolkovitnov. My orders are to give it at once to the general on duty.
Wait a moment, I'll light a candle.
Dude,
What?
get your shit together, bro. Snoozy kid. Who is this?
Wait a moment, I'll light a candle.
I hope you light one under your ass.
You damn rascal. Where do you always hide it? Said the voice under your ass, yeah. Said the voice of the man who was stretching himself to the orderly. This was Sherbin, Khvoronitsyn's adjutant. I found it, he added.
The orderly was striking a light, and Sherbinin was fumbling for something on the candlestick.
Oh, the nasty beast, said he with disgust.
By the light of the sparks, Bolkovitnov saw Scherbinin's youthful face as he held the candle, and the face of another man who was still asleep. This was Konovnitsyn.
When the flame of the sulfur splinters kindled by the tinder burned up, first blue and then red, Sherbinin lit the tallow candle from the candlestick of which the cockroaches that had been gnawing it were running away,
Ew.
and looked at the messenger.
Why are they eating the candle?
Yummy.
Is it made of organic material? What's tallow? Ew.
What is tallow?
Oh no. Rather than just a halo jar.
Bukovitsinov was bespattered all over with mud.
Ew.
What is it?
A hard, fatty substance made from rendering animal fat used in making candles and soap. It is food.
Yeah.
Disgusting. Okay, sorry.
Bukovitsinov, he's bespattered all over with mud. And
Spattered.
smeared. Yeah. Ah. What is the difference?
Smudged.
He smeared his face by wiping it with his sleeve.
Who gave the report? Inquired Shervinin, taking the envelope.
The news is reliable, said Bukovitsinov. Prisoners, Cossacks, and the scouts all say the same thing.
There's nothing to be done. We'll have to wake him, says Shervinin, rising, and going wishful thinking. Rising and going up to the man in the nightcap who lay covered by a greatcoat. Peter Petrovich, said he. Konovnitsin did not stir. To the general staff, he said with a smile, knowing that those words would be sure to arouse him.
And in fact, the head in the nightcap was lifted at once. On Konovnitsin's handsome, resolute face with cheeks flushed by fever, there still remained for an instant a faraway, dreamy expression remote from present affairs. But then he suddenly started, and his face assumed its habitual calm and firm appearance.
Well, what is it? From whom? He asked immediately, but without hurry, blinking at the light.
While listening to the officer's report, Konovnitsin broke the seal and read the dispatch. Hardly had he done so before he lowered his legs to their woolen stockings to the earthen floor and began putting on his boots. Then he took off his nightcap, combed his hair over his temples, and donned his cap.
Did you get here quickly? Let us go to His Highness.
Konovnitsin had understood at once that the news brought was of great importance, and that no time must be lost. He did not consider or ask himself whether the news was good or bad. That did not interest him. He regarded the whole business of the war not with his intelligence or his reason, but by something else. There was within him a deep, unexpressed conviction that all would be well, but that one must not trust to this, and still less speak about it, but must only attend to one's own work. And he did his work, giving his whole strength to the task.
Peter Petrovich Konovnitsin, like Doktorov, seems to have been included merely for propriety's sake in the list of the so-called heroes of 1812. The Barclays, Raevskis, Ermolovs, Platovs, and Miloradoviches. Like Doktorov, he had the reputation of being a man of very limited capacity and information, and like Doktorov, he never made plans of battle, but was always found where the situation was most difficult. Since his appointment as general on duty, he had always slept with his door open, giving orders that every messenger should be allowed to wake him up. In battle, he was always under fire, so that Kutuzov reproved him for it and feared to send him to the front. And like Doktorov, he was one of those unnoticed cogwheels that, without clatter or noise, constitute the most essential part of the machine. I thought there was no such thing as an essential part of the machine. I thought every part of the machine was equally essential.
Coming out of the hut into the damp, dark night, Konovnitsin frowned, partly from an increased pain in his head, and partly at the unpleasant thought that occurred to him of how all that nest of influential men on the staff would be stirred up by this news, especially Bennigsen, who ever since Tarantino had been at daggers drawn with Kutuzov, and how they would make suggestions, quarrel, issue orders, and rescind them. And this premonition was disagreeable to him, though he knew it could not be helped.
And in fact, Toll, to whom he went to communicate the news, immediately began to expound his plans to a general, sharing his quarters, until Konovnitsin, who listened in weary silence, reminded him that they must go to see His Highness.
Love chapters like that.
Why?
So pointless. That's the point.
No, something happened.
Did it?
Yes, the most crucial message is being relayed to headquarters.
What's the message? Do you remember?
Yes, that the whole French army is in the same place where they thought only Broussier was. Formens.
Yeah.
Formens?
I just find it curious, like, what he drops us into. You know? As opposed to staying above.
I agree, but this, I don't feel like it's that.
Okay.
Because he came from saying that this heralds the end of the French, the battle that follows this.
So this little like moment of discovery is very, very important.
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's of interest to us, presumably.
Okay.
I mean, there might be a whole lot of nothing when they go into a war council now.
Yeah.
There's all types of bullshit, but
Yeah. Okay.
making a case.
Well put.
Chapter 17.
Uh-huh.
Kutuzov, like all old people, did not sleep much at night. He often fell asleep unexpectedly in the daytime, but at night, lying on his bed without undressing, he generally remained awake, thinking.
So he lay now on his bed, supporting his large, heavy, scarred head on his plump hand, with one eye open. His only eye?
Yes. With his one eye open.
Oh. With his one eye open, meditating and peering into the darkness.
Since Bennigsen, who corresponded with the emperor and had more influence than anyone else on the staff, had begun to avoid him, Kutuzov was more at ease as to the possibility of himself and his troops being obliged to take part in useless, aggressive movements. The lesson of the Tarantino battle and of the day before it, which Kutuzov remembered with pain, must, he thought, have some effect on others too.
They must understand that we can only lose by taking the offensive. Patience and time are my warriors, my champions, thought Kutuzov. He knew that an apple should not be plucked while it is green.
Excuse me.
Should not be plucked. Unless it's Granny Smith.
I was going to say, those are the only apples I'm interested in. Plucking. That's not an innuendo.
I'm kind of very curious that you only like Granny Smith. No others? There's so many flavors.
I'm not that interested in apples. This is kind of like the coffee thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in apples and peanut butter, or apples and almond butter.
Yeah.
And the only apple that is suitable for apple and almond butter is Granny Smith. Yeah, because it's not pasty.
A pink lady? Never want a pink lady.
No, the other ones are either pasty or sweet. And the sharpness of the Granny Smith, the sour sharpness. I thought you would like Granny Smiths because they're sour.
I do like Granny Smiths.
Oh.
I do. I appreciate all apples. Except a soft apple is so gross.
That's what I mean by pasty, yeah.
Yellow apples, who's eating that?
Are they soft?
I find them soft.
I don't really know that much about all the different apples.
Red Delicious, I used to be obsessed with Red Delicious.
Those are the like bright ones.
I don't know. That's why I don't like pears.
Not all pears are soft.
You're supposed to eat them soft.
Not all of them. Depends on the type.
Oh yeah.
But they are more grainy as opposed to pasty.
Yes.
Like they're in a different family almost of texture.
Yeah.
I can still see why you wouldn't like them, but I dislike pasty apples, but I'm into pears. Because I just accept them to be a different thing.
Yeah.
Also, my favorite fruit, chiku, is a bit grainy.
Is it?
Mm.
Mm.
So maybe I just have better associations.
Can you find it anywhere here? Like
Only frozen.
Only frozen.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it in person.
I want to try it. Frozen. Put it in a smoothie.
Yeah, it's excellent in smoothies. That's why I have so many bags of it.
You
Yeah.
do? Yeah.
The tweezle. Okay.
Plucked while it is green.
Oh, right.
It will fall of itself when ripe, but if picked unripe, the apple is spoiled, the tree is harmed, and your teeth are set on edge.
Whoa.
Like an experienced sportsman, he knew that the beast was wounded, and wounded as only the whole strength of Russia could have wounded it. But whether it was mortally wounded or not was still an undecided question. Now by the fact of Lauriston and Barthélemy having been sent, and by the reports of the guerrillas, Kutuzov was almost sure that the wound was mortal. But he needed further proofs, and it was necessary to wait.
They want to run to see how they have wounded it. Wait and we shall see. Continual maneuvers, continual advances, thought he. What for? Only to distinguish themselves, as if fighting were fun. They are like children from whom one can't get any sensible account of what has happened because they all want to show how well they can fight. But that's not what is needed now.
And what ingenious maneuvers they all propose to me. It seems to them that when they have thought of 2 or 3 contingencies, he remembered the general plan sent him from Petersburg, they have foreseen everything. But the contingencies are endless.
The undecided question as to whether the wound inflicted at Borodino was mortal or not had hung over Kutuzov's head for a whole month. On the one hand, the French had occupied Moscow. On the other, Kutuzov felt assured with all his being that the terrible blow into which he and all the Russians had put their whole strength must have been mortal. But in any case, proofs were needed. He had waited a whole month for them and grew more impatient the longer he waited. Lying on his bed during those sleepless nights, he did just what he reproached those younger generals for doing. He imagined all sorts of possible contingencies, just like the younger men, but with this difference, that he saw thousands of contingencies instead of 2 or 3 and based nothing on them. The longer he thought, the more contingencies presented themselves. He imagined all sorts of movements of the Napoleonic army as a whole or in sections, against Petersburg or against him or to outflank him. He thought too of the possibility, which he feared most of all, that Napoleon might fight him with his own weapon and remain in Moscow awaiting him. Kutuzov even imagined that Napoleon's army might turn back through Medin and Yukhnov, but the one thing he could not foresee was what happened. The insane, convulsive stampede of Napoleon's army during its first 11 days after leaving Moscow, a stampede which made possible what Kutuzov had not yet even dared to think of, the complete extermination of the French. Doktorov's report about Broussier's division, the guerrilla reports of distress in Napoleon's army, rumors of preparations for leaving Moscow, all confirmed the supposition that the French army was beaten and preparing for flight. But these were only suppositions, which seemed important to the younger men, but not to Kutuzov. With his 60 years' experience, he knew what value to attach to rumors, knew how apt people who desire anything are to group all news so that it appears to confirm what they desire, and he knew how readily, in such cases, they omit all that makes for the contrary. And the more he desired it, the less he allowed himself to believe it. This question absorbed all his mental powers. All else was to him only life's customary routine. To such customary routine belonged his conversations with the staff, the letters he wrote from Tarantino to Madame de Stael, the reading of novels, the distribution of awards, his correspondence with Petersburg, and so on. But the destruction of the French, which he alone foresaw, was his heart's one desire.
On the night of the 11th of October, he lay leaning on his arm and thinking of that.
There was a stir in the next room, and he heard the steps of tall Konovnitsyn and Bolkovitinov.
Hey, who's there? Come in, come in. What news? The field marshal called out to them.
While a footman was lighting a candle, Toll communicated the substance of the news.
Who brought it? Asked Kutuzov, with a look which, when the candle was lit, struck Toll by its cold severity.
There can be no doubt about it, Your Highness.
Call him in. Call him here.
Kutuzov sat up, with one leg hanging down from the bed and his big paunch resting against the other, which was doubled under him. He screwed up his seeing eye to scrutinize the messenger more carefully, as if wishing to read in his face what preoccupied his own mind.
Tell me, friend, said he to Bolkovitinov, in his low-aged voice, as he pulled together the shirt, which gaped open on his chest. Come nearer. So creepy.
It's super creepy, and it reminds me of what Ishan says.
Right.
And to come kosher.
Kosher.
I want to
So
close
he can bite you.
Yeah, basically. He says, bite Ishan.
Do you bite him?
No, not just to me.
Like, yeah.
Just to like people. No, they don't. Sometimes they like go.
Playfully.
Yeah. Sometimes they like go, and then he's like, don't bite Ishan! And then he's like, bite Ishan.
Oh my god. So cute.
Don't bite Ishan, bite Ishan.
Come nearer. What news have you brought me, eh? That Napoleon has left Moscow? Are you sure, eh?
Bolkovitinov gave a detailed account from the beginning of all he had been told to report.
Speak quicker! Don't torture me! Kutuzov interrupted him.
Bolkovitinov told him everything and was then silent, awaiting instructions. Toll was beginning to say something, but Kutuzov checked him. He tried to say something, but his face suddenly puckered and wrinkled. He waved his arm at Toll and turned to the opposite side of the room, to the corner darkened by the icons that hung there.
O Lord, my Creator, thou hast heard our prayer, said he in a tremulous voice with folded hands. Russia is saved. I thank thee, O Lord. And he wept. Yeah. Could not have been.
What?
Could not have been saved.
Could not have been.
Yeah.
I'm not. What?
Like, they didn't know that's how the war was going to go.
You mean he can't know that now? It might not have panned out that way.
No, I'm saying that, like, I'm reading this kind of from a cozy position because I'm like, I know the ending.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't.
Right. The point is that he does.
Now,
Here.
I'm more referring to the fact that he wept. Like,
Because that's how much he knows.
what?
He knows.
He knows now, but I'm saying he didn't before. That's why he's weeping.
Correct.
Yeah.
Still hasn't happened.
No.
So this is still like arguably premature, considering it hasn't happened. But it's not premature for him because his strategic military mind is like,
I'm very confused by his strategic military mind.
are you? That's one of the only things that doesn't confuse me in this whole movie.
Really? I mean,
The only thing.
it seems like I think his like patience and waiting and waiting and waiting is right. But it's very funny because he just always seems like sleepy and grumpy.
Yeah, but that's only because he's not doing the stuff that everybody else is doing.
It doesn't seem like he does much of anything. Like that's his skill is that he doesn't do anything.
Yeah. But that's a formidable skill if no one is doing it.
He's like the boxer in the ring who just like tires the other person out.
Didn't think we were gonna go for a boxing metaphor, but I liked it.
Yeah. Do you want to keep reading?
Yeah.
Okay. Chapter 18 then.
Chapter 18.
From the time he received this news to the end of the campaign, all Kutuzov's activity was directed toward restraining his troops, by authority, by guile, and by entreaty from useless attacks, maneuvers, or encounters with the perishing enemy. Doktorov went to Malo-Yaroslavets, but Kutuzov lingered with the main army and gave orders for the evacuation of Kaluga, a retreat beyond which towns seemed to him quite possible.
You know what I am not clear about? He never seems to explain himself to anyone. He never seems to try to persuade anyone else of his reasoning.
Yeah.
Or at least we don't. I don't feel like we see it. Unless I'm forgetting, skipping certain parts. It feels like everyone is talking at him.
Yeah.
And he's like,
I think that's right. I think he's thinking to himself, stupid, but not trying to get someone else to see his point of view.
correct. Yeah. In a sense, he's doing the same thing with them as he's doing with Napoleon.
Just waiting them out and then doing whatever he wants.
Mhm.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's like, I'm going to sit here, I can nap for a moment. Everywhere Kutuzov retreated, but the enemy, without waiting for his retreat, fled in the opposite direction.
Napoleon's historians describe to us his skilled maneuvers at Tarantino and Malo-Yaroslavets and make conjectures as to what would have happened had Napoleon been in time to penetrate into the rich southern provinces.
But not to speak of the fact that nothing prevented him from advancing into those southern provinces, for the Russian army did not bar his way. The historians forget that nothing could have saved his army, for then already it bore within itself the germs of inevitable ruin. How could that army, which had found abundant supplies in Moscow and had trampled them underfoot instead of keeping them? They had. And on arriving at Smolensk had looted provisions instead of storing them. How could that army recuperate in Kaluga province, which was inhabited by Russians such as those who lived in Moscow and where fire had the same property of consuming what was set ablaze?
It's that the corrupted.
I didn't realize they trampled the supplies.
Maybe it's metaphorical.
Yeah.
The army could not recover anywhere. Since the Battle of Borodino and the pillage of Moscow, it had borne within itself, as it were, the chemical elements of dissolution.
You don't often see just out and out sarcasm. from offers. And that's literally what you just said.
Yeah.
Right? How could that army recuperate in Kaluga province, which was inhabited by Russians, such as those who lived in Moscow and where fire had the same property of consuming what was set ablaze?
You want sarcasm?
100%. He's like, same shit. How could it possibly? How could they possibly have done to other places what they did to Moscow? People are the same and fire is the same.
Okay.
How do you read it?
I'm just saying, like, it could be read without. It's irony. It's not necessarily sarcasm.
Why is it ironic?
Maybe it's just the tone. I don't know why it's ironic. Sarcasm is like saying the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he's saying the opposite.
He's saying, how could they have?
Yeah, how could they? Like, you could ask that question sincerely.
He's not. He's not.
Lips.
Oh no, I thought you had vowed.
I know.
The members, is that where we are?
Yeah.
The members of, what had once been an army, Napoleon himself and all his soldiers fled, without knowing whither, each concerned only to make his escape as quickly as possible from this position, of the hopelessness of which they were all more or less vaguely conscious.
So it came about that at the Council of Malo-Yaroslavets, when the generals pretending to confer together expressed various opinions, all mouths were closed by the opinion uttered by the simple-minded soldier Mouton, who, speaking last, said what they all felt, that the one thing needful was to get away as quickly as possible. And no one, not even Napoleon, could say anything against that truth, which they all recognized.
Why?
I don't know. Is it like that the soldiers are out of his control, evidently? So, like,
It feels almost like they find themselves marooned in Moscow. Now, like,
yeah.
I'm gonna go back to France, but I can't imagine that they haven't experienced this before everywhere they've been. Also, have they left any French people in Moscow? Not French
Not
people,
sure.
I mean
Like
French.
soldiers.
Like, yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, like, why did they get out of Moscow? Wouldn't it have been smarter to, like, stay, like, build up their army, maybe wait out the winter, and then continue expanding? Like, I'm just thinking of, because yeah, like, you're constantly, like, stretching your forces, and so obviously I can totally see it being easier in Europe, where everything is much more concentrated, but in Russia it's just so large and marooned. So, like, so I would think you want to, like, create, like, a strong fort in Moscow or something, and then from there send out your army. So they just abandoned that.
I mean, I honestly don't know how much they care about Russia.
I think they wanted to conquer it.
I think they wanted to conquer it. That's not the same as wanting to keep it.
Mm.
Like, I could see it being more of like a stupid power struggle. But then the goal is not to, like, sow roots into every part of the country. I don't know. No idea why they decided to do it.
I'm amazed he didn't have a plan.
He probably did have some plan.
And he's just abandoned that?
No, I'm saying he probably did have some, like, reason for leaving, and we're just not getting supplied.
Like, I would just think, he's like, great, and now Russia. I would think that he'd be like, okay, so this is what's going to happen. We're going to go to Moscow, and then from there, Petersburg, and then, like, you don't just You don't just go into Russia without some plan of
I
it.
don't know why they didn't go to Petersburg.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you do go into Russia without some plan. I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds really dumb. It almost sounds like the only difference between this being like a really restful and recuperative stop and it being like instead the dissipation of the army is the impact that Moscow had on the individual soldiers. Because it didn't
Yeah.
sound like they rested and recuperated, even though that's easily what they could have been doing because they had safety and provisions and
Yeah.
everything they wanted, everything
Yeah.
they could have wanted. Sorry, where are we?
Could say anything against that truth which they all recognize. So I think they're, but though.
But though they all realized that it was necessary to get away, there still remained a feeling of shame at admitting that they must flee. An external shock was needed to overcome that shame, and this shock came in due time. It was what the French called what is that word?
The hurrah de l'empereur.
There's no translation.
Nope.
The day after the council, sorry, that's the end of the paragraph.
A day after the council at Malo-Yaroslavets, Napoleon rode out early in the morning amid the lines of his army with his suite of marshals and an escort, on the pretext of inspecting the army and the scene of the previous and of the impending battle. Some Cossacks on the prowl for booty fell in with the emperor and very nearly captured him. If the Cossacks did not capture Napoleon then, what saved him was the very thing that was destroying the French army, the booty on which the Cossacks fell. Here, as at Tarantino, they went after plunder, leaving the men. Disregarding Napoleon, they rushed after the plunder, and Napoleon managed to escape.
When Les Enfants du Don, what's Don?
That's like give.
But only with
I think.
two N's and an E, right?
Les Enfants, unless it's Les Enfants du Don. I thought it was give, but it might
that
also
has
be a
two
river
N's.
in Russia that rises near Tula.
I think it might be that because I think the
Yeah.
give has two N's and an E.
If it's a verb, but if this meant something else, I don't know.
Yeah, but even the noun is ER, right? It's an
Yeah.
ER verb.
Yeah, but I'm saying so like done would be like to done,
Which would still have an.
but I'm saying anyway.
So how?
So that's still like a verb. But if
Yeah.
this is more of like a noun,
But the noun of that word is donner. DONNER.
a donner.
That's the noun of give. Now there are ER
isn't.
verbs and IR verbs.
Yeah.
I think don is like an ER verb,
Yeah, it is.
which would make the noun DONNER.
And don. Not necessarily.
Then
A
what?
donner?
Not a donner.
What do you mean?
Like to give.
Yeah, a verb.
In its non-conjugated style, in its non-conjugated form.
If it's if it's conjugated or not, it's still a verb.
That's true. That's
But
true.
it might be related to the river.
I think that's probably what it is, but only because of the context in the sentence.
Yeah.
When they might so easily have taken the emperor himself in the midst of his army, it was clear that there was nothing for it but to fly as fast as possible along the nearest familiar road. Napoleon, with his 40-year-old stomach, understood that hint, not feeling his former agility and boldness, and under the influence of the fright the Cossacks had given him, he at once agreed with Mouton and issued orders, as the historians tell us, to retreat by the Smolensk road.
That Napoleon agreed with Mouton and that the army retreated does not prove that Napoleon caused it to retreat. but that the forces which influenced the whole army and directed it along the Mozhaisk, that is, the Smolensk road, acted simultaneously on him also. Chapter 19.
Yeah.
A man in motion always devises an aim for that motion. To be able to go 1,000 miles, he must imagine that something good awaits him at the end of those 1,000 miles. One must have the prospect of a promised land to have the strength to move.
The promised land for the French during their advance had been Moscow. During their retreat, it was their native land. But that native land was too far off, and for a man going 1,000 miles, it is absolutely necessary to set aside his final goal and to say to himself, today I shall get to a place 25 miles off where I shall rest and spend the night. And during the first day's journey, that resting place eclipses his ultimate goal and attracts all his hopes and desires. And the impulses felt by a single person are always magnified by a crowd in a crowd.
For the French retreating along the old Smolensk road, the final goal, their native land, was too remote, and their immediate goal was Smolensk, toward which all their desires and hopes, enormously intensified in the mass, urged them on. It was not that they knew that much food and fresh troops awaited them in Smolensk, nor that they were told so. On the contrary, their superior officers and Napoleon himself knew that provisions were scarce there, but because this alone could give them strength to move on and endure their present privations. So both those who knew and those who did not know deceived themselves and pushed on to Smolensk as to a promised land.
Coming out onto the high road, the French fled with surprising energy and unheard of rapidity toward the goal they had fixed on. Besides the common impulse which bound the whole crowd of French into one mass and supplied them with a certain energy, there was another cause binding them together, their great numbers. As with the physical law of gravity, their enormous mass drew the individual human atoms to itself. In their hundreds of thousands, they moved like a whole nation.
Each of them desired nothing more than to give himself up as a prisoner to escape from all this horror and misery. But on the one hand, the force of this common attraction to Smolensk, their goal, drew each of them in the same direction. On the other hand, an army corps could not surrender to a company, and though the French availed themselves of every convenient opportunity to detach themselves and to surrender on the slightest decent pretext, such pretexts did not always occur. Their very numbers and their crowded and swift movement deprived them of that possibility, and rendered it not only difficult, but impossible for the Russians to stop this movement, to which the French were directing all their energies. Beyond a certain limit, no mechanical disruption of the body could hasten the process of decomposition.
What misery and horror!
I don't know. It, it's interesting that like we're not inside the French heads at all, and yet there seems to be so much talk about their not their state of mind, but it's kind of like like when it was talking about it's like the spirit of the army. It seems like the spirit of the French army has completely eroded.
I guess it feels very unsatisfying in this moment to not have any kind of reason for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get that he's not super into reasons,
But still,
but there's something that feels so unsatisfying about, like it makes me want to go read the history, which is a lost effect I think he would want to have.
right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
A lump of snow cannot be melted instantaneously. There is a certain limit of time in less than which no amount of heat can melt the snow. On the contrary, the greater the heat, the more solidified the remaining snow becomes. Right?
The great what? Hmm?
How's that last bit?
Sure. Not a scientist. Of the Russian commanders, Kutuzov alone understood this. When the flight of the French army along the Smolensk road became well defined, what Konovnitsyn had foreseen on the night of the 11th of October began to occur. The superior officers all wanted to distinguish themselves, to cut off, to seize, to capture, and to overthrow the French. and all clamored for action.
Kutuzov alone used all his power, and such power is very limited in the case of any commander-in-chief, to prevent an attack.
He could not tell them what we say now. Why fight? Why block the road, losing our own men and inhumanly slaughtering unfortunate wretches? What is the use of that when a third of their army has melted away on the road from Moscow to Vyazma without any battle? But drawing from his aged wisdom what they could understand, he told them of the Golden Bridge. And they laughed at and slandered him, flinging themselves on, rending and exulting over the dying beast.
Ermolov, Miloradovich, Platov, and others in proximity to the French near Vyazma could not resist their Platov. I'm getting confused with the guy in the shed around.
Yeah.
I don't remember who the fuck this is. Could not resist their desire to cut off and break up two French corps. And by way of reporting their intention to Kutuzov, they sent him a blank sheet of paper in an envelope. What a bunch of dicks.
And try as Kutuzov might to restrain the troops, our men attacked, trying to bar the road. Infantry regiments, we are told, advanced to the attack with music and with drums beating, and killed and lost thousands of men.
But they did not cut off or overthrow anybody, and the French army, closing up more firmly at the danger, continued, while steadily melting away to pursue its fatal path to Smolensk.
That's the end of the book.
Yep. Okay, book 13.
When it was like, oh, the French army is like already melting away, is it like people are abandoning it?
In part.
Yeah.
And they're getting captured, and again, like, I don't really know why.
Yeah.
It might just have been because their leader made a stupid decision, and they're all suffering. Like, you can't really assume that they all agreed with the decision to do that. No, you can, because that's kind of what he says.
Right.
Is that they were all wanting to do it. I don't know. It's really strange. This bit.
Yeah, it seems like there was like an internal debilitation that occurred that everyone's recognizing. Like the fight has gone out of all of them. They just want to get home now.
Yeah, but why would you surrender if that was the aim?
They just surrender.
Why would they be like surrendering, looking for any excuse to surrender to the Russians?
Mm-hmm.
It would be really funny if at the end of this, like, one felt like they had no idea why any of this happened. At least this bit, like, I'm missing a major piece.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Well, it's dark now.
It's dark.
Which means it's time to say goodbye. Goodbye.
Good night.